Welcome, the good rabbi.
Thank you. That was very kind. I should live up to that introduction. Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning. You can go ahead and put the slide up and I'll have that in the background. So I was asked to speak to you this morning about prayer, Judaism and prayer. So you can see behind me what we call the prayer mountain. That is symbolic of what we try to do with our prayer. I'm going to try to move this away from my mouth so that maybe I don't pop so much. This prayer mountain represents the idea of Jewish prayer. Now, when I say Jewish prayer, I don't mean only Jewish prayer. I'm going to guess that this is a lot of people's idea behind prayer, is that we're trying to get to a higher place. In Judaism, we have a very specific path that we follow to get there. So you can see on the prayer mountain, we start off, let's go ahead and do the first one here, warming up. Woo! Don't you love prezzies? They make my life so easy, right? Wow, looks like she knows what she's doing. She doesn't. Okay, so we start at the base of the mountain. And at the base of the mountain, we're coming in from the parking lot. We're coming in from the work day. We're coming in from wherever we've been in dealing with the banal. And we need to get ourselves ready for prayer. This prayer mountain is really for any Jewish worship at all, whether it's morning prayer on the Sabbath or evening prayer on a Wednesday night. There are changes in what we say in the liturgy. The idea behind it stays the same. I base this particularly on Sabbath prayers. But depending on the day of the week, the overall concept is the same. So you come in from the parking lot and you're thinking about all of the things that have happened all week long, if it's the Sabbath, all the stuff that's on your mind. And the idea is we need to ground ourselves, center ourselves. We're about to climb a mountain. You got to warm up your muscles. In this sense, it's the muscles of our mind, our intention, and our hearts for our prayer. And we do so by recognizing four things. Depends on how you count. I'm not good with numbers. First of all, we as human beings are a compilation of our physical bodies, our minds, and our souls. So the opening prayers and the whole set of prayers that we start with, and let me say that following these rubrics of prayer, easily a 2-hour service. So I should lay that out. Okay, so just know that we're talking about 2 hours. So with body, mind, and soul, that's what our opening prayers say. Wow, look, my body works well enough for me to be here in this moment. That is a miracle. The prayer is actually very specific. The things that are supposed to be closed are closed, and the things that are supposed to be open are open. The Hebrew uses the word orifices. Because if my skin, which is supposed to be closed, were open, I wouldn't be able to be here. And if my arteries, which are supposed to be open, were closed, I wouldn't be able to be here. Just my physical presence helps me to be aware of the moment. Then we move into soul. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehora hi, eternal God, the soul that you have breathed into me is pure. Judaism starts with the basic notion that our souls are pure and clean and beautiful. Now, what we might do what we might do as humans is another story. But our souls are pure. My body works, and my soul is pure. And with these two things together, oh God, I can use my mind to be aware of the blessings. And our series of blessings in this first warm up, let me be aware of what's around me, say things like, wow, praised are you, God, you clothe the naked, which we know, of course, God doesn't literally clothe the naked unless we think about it as us, as instruments of God's love when we go out and clothe the naked, when we lift up the fallen. These are some of the things of 3 pages of these are miracles that happen every day if only we see them and are aware of them and think about them and recognize them. And we can't fully do that unless our mind and body and spirit are coming together in a balanced whole. Once we've had this opportunity to think about here, this is what's going on in the world, then we move into those Psalms of praise, the next part of these warm-up, which are quotes specifically from Psalms, the book of Psalms, that help us then to start to praise God in God's own words. The idea behind all of this is that by the time we get through this 15 minutes, more or less, we're ready to actually approach and start in prayer in community. So let's take a look at the next slide. We go a little bit up higher, and thank you for mentioning Abraham Joshua Heschel. You set it up for me beautifully. Rabbi Heschel was not a tall man, and he had, of course, a thick European German accent, and he would come up to the podium, and I won't try to imitate his accent, but he would come up to the podium when he was speaking to large groups, and he would say, "Friends, a great miracle just occurred." And everybody would hush. What great miracle just occurred? And Rabbi Heschel would say, "The sun set." Because every day, morning, noon, and evening, creation is an ongoing miracle. After we've warmed up, the next set of prayers is talking about what God does for us. In Judaism, there are 3 primary things that God does for us. Creation. Every day, every moment of every day, the fact that creation continues, that is something that God does for us. It's written as, in the morning, God who creates light, and in the evening, God who brings on the evening. The next prayer, because just as with our morning prayers, and we're being aware of the way that the world works, that my body works, that things around me work, it's sort of modeled here as well. Creation is the world works. And the next prayer is revelation, understanding. God, you give us understanding, and very specifically in our prayers, that is referring to Torah. Now, Torah is its own huge concept. In its most narrow form, it's the 5 books of Moses. In its widest form, it's any Jewish teaching that's ever happened in the last 5,000 years. So God, you give us revelation, the moment of standing at Mount Sinai, but also the moment this morning of reading something that had my eyes open. Because creation works, and because we have revelation or Torah, we then have the central words of our faith. Ruby, did you want to join me for this? We have the things that we teach our children that are who we are, And Ruby wanted to help me to demonstrate what we call the Shema, which is Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. O hear, O Israel, the eternal our God is one. Because we have revelation, we have these words. I'm going to get down near you so you can use the microphone with me, okay? All right, ready. So this is how it goes. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malechuto Leolam Vaed. Thank you. You want to come back up for Behafta later? As the central watchword of our faith, it's a quote out of course, Torah itself. But it's very interesting the way that we look at it. So I think it's interesting. Maybe you will too. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. Okay? What's hard about that? Except hearing is a physical experience. Either you're able to hear or you're not. Right? I mean, that's why we have hearing aids to help us. Or as my children will tell you, every time they say anything and they're not facing me and in the same room, I say, you gotta, what? It's just a physical thing, hearing. So on the one hand, oh, hear, O Israel, okay, that's not what it's saying. It's saying, listen. Shh. Listen. And then you can say, oh, okay, well, oh, Israel, we know what that is. Israel's the Jewish people. Hey, Jewish people, listen up. Except the word Israel, when you pull it apart, can mean, probably does mean, I propose that it means, with 3,000 years under me of, I didn't make this up, the one who struggles with God. Right, because Israel is the name that Jacob got after he wrestled with this divine being, Yisrael. Listen, those who struggle with God, or he who struggles with God, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai you may be familiar with as a name for God. It's translated, it means Lord, except the text does not say Lord. It doesn't say Adonai. The text says Yud-He Vav-He, one of the names for God, the name of God that is the name of mercy, God's merciful name. But it has absolutely linguistically nothing to do with Lord, or Adonai for that matter. It's the ineffable name of God. So here, when we're in the midst of talking about what God does, this form of God, Yud-He Vav-He, is, and I'm sure you know the verse, I am that I am, except that the Hebrew is probably I will be that which I will be, which indicates that God is eternally being, moving, changing. God loves change. Listen, he who struggles with God, the one who is ever changing, the eternal one, is our God. The eternally moving, becoming, is one. And that's within the section of prayers of what God does for us. God does for us an eternal change. So we go from there into the next part of what God does for us, creation, revelation, redemption. When you think about the story of the Jewish people, Exodus, redemption, came first, and then Sinai, revelation. But in our prayers, it's switched. You want to know what we believe? Look at our prayers, not our sacred scriptures. Not that you can't figure it out from our sacred scriptures, but our prayers are a reflection of who we are and what we believe. We made up the prayers So what do we believe? Creation comes first, then revelation and understanding, and then because we have revelation and understanding, then we can be redeemed on a daily basis. That's what God does for us. Next slide. We move up a little bit higher, and then we're able to talk to God. We go from talking about what God does for us to actually facing east, facing towards Jerusalem, which we've done for 2,000 years. And we talk to God in a set order of prayer that includes on the Sabbath 7 prayers and includes on weekdays 19 prayers. That's already 201 to go into all of that. But just to know that all of these sections are very set prayers, what we say. It's called keva. It means it's set, it's specific. This is what we must say. The degree of kavanah, intention, that we bring to it is up to us. That's always the challenge, what's set and what we bring. So then we talk to God, and notice that that's just a little bit higher. Next slide. The peak of the mountain is hearing God. So we've gone through these prayers very similar to what we've had here this morning in terms of congregants in the congregation, service leaders up front. Sometimes we have music, sometimes we don't. It just all varies. And we've gone through it, and then we get to this point where we're reminded that all of our prayer is a sacred drama, and the most dramatic is when we listen for God's word, which we do through actually reading the Torah scroll, the 5 books of Moses, out of a scroll that's written in Hebrew, no vowels. People find that very interesting. No vowels, no vocalization. Either you know it or you don't. And we do study it beforehand with the vowels and vocalization so that when it comes time to reading it, the way that it was originally written in the scroll, we're prepared for it. But the congregation stands. We have an individual who's taking the role of Moses, who walks to the ark, who carries the scroll from the sacred ark that is on our high place of worship to the congregation. The congregation in that moment becomes Sinai. And the people standing at Sinai, and Moses, the person who carries the Torah scroll, brings the Torah physically, literally down into the community, walks around so that everybody can kiss it and show their regard for it until it's brought back up, and then we actually read from it. There is a special cantillation for the reading. Rue, if you want to do Ve'ahavta with me, you can. You want me to just do it? Okay. So there's a special cantillation for the reading. I actually don't usually use it. We all have our struggles, and music is mine, so this one I know well enough that I can share it with you. The idea is that in reading the word, and we have a set portion that we read every week, and the same portion is read all throughout the world. So this week, or actually yesterday, last week, we are reading the verses like 4 to 7 of the book of Numbers. So we take a selection of that and we read it, and if you were to go to any Jewish congregation anywhere in the world, we're more or less reading from the same section all year long, from the beginning of Genesis to the end of Deuteronomy, and then we start over again. Turn it and turn it over again, for all is within it, and when you read it again, you see something new. So Reverend Malgett had mentioned that demonstrating some of the musical portions is interesting, so this is how the Torah cantillation sounds when we read. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. You get the idea. And those musical notes, if you will, are actually punctuation. They're not written in the Torah scroll. You learn it from studying it externally, and then you apply it when you're reading the scroll itself, but you can hear the punctuation. Let me think for a second. I'm telling you, I don't hear this stuff. And you shall love Adonai, your God, with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart. You can kind of hear the punctuation there, and so it tells us where the breaks are, those kinds of things. It's also in this section, hearing God, where the rabbi or lay leader gives some interpretation of the text to apply it to today. And it's interesting how, when the text is already predetermined, what do you do to make it relevant for this week? Next slide. So we go from hearing God to closing prayers. The world is one, we remember our dead, basically. Those are the two closing prayers. Next slide. And then we have the rest of the Sabbath day, however we're going to spend it. Our tradition teaches that holidays and the Sabbath should be divided equally between God and other joyful things. So, prayer for a third of the day, study for a third of the day, food for a third of the day. Not just food, but pretty much that's Jewish tradition. Next slide. All right. So the idea, if you can kind of see it here, is that when we leave the rest of the Sabbath day, we're still on a higher place than when we first came in. We're not at the peak and the height, but even though we've gone somewhat down the mountain, we're still higher. So that's kind of Jewish prayer on one foot. I'd like to say that we have all of the time at Temple B'nai Israel people who come who are not Jewish, have no intention of becoming Jewish. We don't proselytize. We don't try to make anybody become Jewish, but people who come just because they're interested to see what prayer looks like. And you are always welcome to do so that it kind of makes more sense. And if you're interested to learn about it a little bit more from what we do firsthand, I'll be happy to answer questions after the service if I'm able to. And really, I thank you for the opportunity just to put a face and a name together with a religion so that hopefully if you do have questions about Judaism, the Jewish people, any of that, that you feel like you have a place that you can come to ask, instead of how many of us feel about those that we don't know, just making it up or Googling it. I'm here, and I'm here as a resource. Thank you for having me.